Hey everyone, so if you're a Sony FX3 user, I'm sure you're aware of the new firmware update for the camera. They added a ton of new useful features like time code, LUTs, and the new Cine EI modes. This video is to focus on Cine EI, what it is, and how I intend on using it. Sony provided FX3 users with 3 separate Cine EI modes. There's flexible ISO, there's Cine EI quick, and then just Cine EI. I think that for my uses, Cine EI will be the most beneficial, and I'll tell you why. So Cine EI applies to S-Log. So when you're shooting S-Log, and in general when you're shooting, you want to stick to your camera's native ISO. So why is Cine EI important? So when you're shooting in the S-Log space, you want to make sure that you're always shooting on your camera's native ISO. So basically, the FX3 has 2 native ISOs. You have what we believed was the base ISO of 640, which is now changed to 800. So 800 is your lowest base ISO, and then you have a second higher range ISO, which is 12,800. So essentially you want to be shooting at these base ISOs whenever possible to ensure the cleanest image and most dynamic range out of your camera. So why I find Cine EI so useful is that it makes sure that you're always shooting in those base ISOs. So in your settings, you can swipe up in the menu and you can select Cine EI, and then you can select your base ISOs. So you're going to select 800 for your lower tier and 12,800 for the next. The thing that I find most beneficial about Cine EI is that I can map a custom button to switch between those 2 base ISOs right away. In the past, I was using a scroll wheel, so I'd be scrolling from 640 all the way up to 12,800, and it honestly didn't take that long, but the fact that now I can assign a custom button to simply switch between 800 and 12,800 is super beneficial to my style of shooting. Another interesting thing about Cine EI is that when you're in that mode and when you've set your base ISOs, when you make ISO adjustments outside of that, so if you still had a scroll wheel or a dial assigned to ISO and you were changing that in the Cine AI setting, it's not actually affecting your footage, which is kind of difficult to wrap your head around, but just hear me out. So if you have it set to 800 and 12,800 and you're making those adjustments in camera, it'll show and give you a preview on your monitor that your footage is brighter. The exposure is increasing as you're increasing that ISO. However, when you're in this setting, it's not actually affecting the metadata of the file that you're recording. So when you're shooting at that lower tier and it's set to 800 and you're making those adjustments, just know that when you import your footage into whatever software you're using, it's still going to be shot at either ISO 800 or 12,800. This feature is there for people who have a little bit more control over their sets. And for example, they want to shoot at that base ISO of 800 and maybe you want to see what your image will look like if you pull it one stop, which would be useful for kind of post-production stuff or if you have an editor that you're working with. So why this is super useful for me, I'm somebody who shoots a lot of kind of run and gun stuff and weddings. I don't have a ton of time to set up lighting and really play with my scene. Stuff is usually happening once and I have to get the shot. So why this is super useful for me, it just takes out the guesswork of things. For example, if I'm shooting outside, I have an ND on my camera and I'm shooting at the base ISO of 800. For whatever reason, maybe I have to run inside to get some clips of something that's happening. I don't want to have to kind of take my ND off or mess with my ISO settings and kind of risk just getting noisy, crappy footage. Now I can kind of keep my ND on my camera. I'm shooting at 800 outside. If I have to run inside to a dark room, I press one button and it bumps me up to 12,800, and you can do that mid-shooting rather than kind of just scrolling and making sure that you hit that second tier of ISO. I love that I can just assign it to one button. Anyway, hopefully this helps you guys. Maybe it's something that you can incorporate in your workflow. If you have any questions at all, let me know. Obviously, this isn't a technical review of Cine EI. It's just how I intend on using it in my workflow. I really like how quickly I can make changes now, and it just kind of takes the guesswork out of shooting. So I hope you guys like this video. Leave any comments. Thanks.